Hi, I'm RP Spartan, and welcome to my very first Call of Duty Crossbow guide. Now I wanted to make this video because I noticed there's a lack of crossbow guides out there that sort of get the general testing down back when it first came out and was released for multiplayer, but ever since Warzone and Ground War got more popular, especially Warzone, there really hasn't been any updates to it or any sort of in-depth testing. So I took it upon myself to see what other results we can get for some more niche playstyles. I also want you to keep in mind that this footage was recorded March 25th, a day before the March 26th patch dropped, which increased the crossbow bolt flight time from 3 seconds to 6 seconds. Now, I haven't noticed any significant difference in attachment testing post-patch, but the recorded footage itself is from pre-patch, so keep that in mind. And before we begin with our testing, I'm going to leave some timestamps below, that way you can jump around to section to see what you're most interested in or what you wish to reference in the future. Now the first thing I tested was the shot grouping, and I noticed with the iron sights, there was a lot of sway as you can see here. And the result is that my grouping was rather off. So I switched to a 4X scope, the sniper scope for the crossbow, and I got a much better picture without holding breath or doing anything else since the sway is much more manageable. Now for the remainder of the testing, I will be using a 4X sniper scope for the crossbow because it gives me the minimum sway and the least amount of variables that will come into impacting accuracy. This is important if I wish to have accurate and consistent data based on the influence of just the attachments I am willing to test. And as you see the results here, I will shoot 5 bolts and take a plot graph of that each time and show you where the bolts have landed. I have done previous testing where I shot 10 and the results remained mostly the same. So these are relatively accurate, and for speed of the video, I decided to go with 5 because 10 shots takes way too long. First, we're going to take a look at both the cables and 2 of the limbs. I did some testing on the Talon grip to see if recoil affected the grouping, and nope. No difference in accuracy, so I decided to omit those results. Starting with the 16-strand cable, we can see here with the lowered velocity, they land significantly lower than the base crossbow. But these are ridiculously accurate. All the bolts have an extremely tight grouping, with many of them even landing inside of each other. As for our other cable, the 28-strand, our results are the complete opposite. We have almost no drop at 40 meters, but with absolutely no accuracy. Bolts hit the plate, to the right of it, to the left of it, down. They were flying everywhere, and it made for terrible grouping. And I can confirm from experience, making a shot at 50 meters while holding your breath, while centered on the target, is likely to miss due to it flying horizontally. Now, for the results for the 200-pound arms, I can't say with full confidence it is the best and safest attachment you can equip to your crossbow. I consider this to be the bread and butter of any build. You can choose not to use any other attachment since they usually have some sort of downside, but with this attachment, there are no significant downsides. And as you can see by its tighter grouping, there's actually an increase in accuracy compared to the base crossbow. This is an unlisted boost, unless this was, of course, purely RNG. But with the added range to your bolt, they will fly further, and this makes this attachment absolutely necessary to make your shots at medium to long range. The less you have to compensate to hit a target, the better. As for the 100-pound quill arm, there is only a decrease in velocity, but it retains the same accuracy grouping as the base crossbow. Maybe a couple of frames faster for ADS speed, which other users have pointed out, or maybe even less recoil for your one shot. But that's not a good trade, not at all in my opinion. I really only see a loss here, especially since we're talking about Warzone and Ground War. I would not recommend this in any build. If you can find a reason to justify using this attachment, please let me know in the comments, because as far as I can tell, it's not that great. Now it's time to talk about the special bolts. This was the most complicated part of the testing, which I'll explain in a moment. But for now, there's only 3 types of bolts: Fury, Venom, and Backburn. I'll be referring to them as explosive, gas, and thermite since those are the most common terms used to describe them. I ran into an issue with my typical testing method with these explosive bolts. After firing all 5 bolts, I walked up to the wall to see if there were any impact marks, and the explosive texture was the only thing left. Yep, just a burnt wall. So I had to go frame by frame and mark where each bolt landed, then measure and compare them to the bricks, then properly plot them and double check to see if I did it accurately. So ignoring the bolts in the wall, which are from the iron sight testing, we can see that the explosive bolts drop lower than the standard bolt, and have a similar shot grouping. This means that there is only a slight decrease in accuracy and velocity. Another thing to note here is that they landed 1 to 2 bricks higher than the 100-pound quill arms, further demonstrating how badly the 100-pound arms impact your bolt velocity. Next up is my favorite to use, gas bolts. Although the grouping here is tighter, the velocity is the same. I understand these bolts look higher than the previous image, but after closer inspection, they landed within the same area on average, roughly 3 to 4 bricks below the target, and roughly 1 brick in width, with RNG sighting with the gas bolts at this time. As for our thermite, I got some weird results that required multiple tests. When the bolt fires, it sticks to the walls, burns, then drops down. It does leave an impact mark. Now, looking at my data, it seemed a bit off compared to the other bolts, so instead of just going off the markings alone, I took images of each shot to double check that these marks were accurate and the bolt was landing where the marks said they were. And sadly, the impact marks were true. This is the actual shot grouping. Now, I'm not sure if this is a bug or from when they nerfed the thermite bolts, but my shot grouping was wildly inaccurate, enough to make me question if this was the intended function. As you can see by a few of these images, the bolts go flying way off target, very disappointing. But later in the video, I do find a way to make them work. Now we're going to just take a quick look at some of the sights and see how much they affect the sway. And listed here, you can see that we're going to be using the iron sights, the 4x scope, and the variable zoom scope. So as you can see here with our iron sight testing, we have a standing, crouching, and prone position. However, each one does impact the amount of sway and stability that the sight does have. As seen in our previous testing, the iron sights have the least amount of precision. Using the 4-powered scope, we can see how your firing stance can affect your grouping and the stability of your shots. Normally, this stat is irrelevant. However, with the crossbow, your first shot should be your only shot. The easier it is to acquire your target, the faster you can fire with confidence. Yes, the hold breath feature will stabilize your shot, but realistically, this will not always be the best option. Crouching makes the sway tolerable, while also allowing the option to reposition yourself at a moment's notice. Speaking of holding breath, the VOK sight used to be one of my favorites due to it lacking a scope glare. However, it lacks the ability to hold breath, making it inconsistent at longer ranges due to its uncontrollable sway. Onto some attachment combinations. We have a few examples I picked out to be strong in Warzone and Ground War. My most used class is what is pretty common with the crossbow trend right now, albeit with some minor changes. Starting with the 200-pound arms, these give you the additional range you need in Warzone, and this counters the lost velocity with the Fury bolts. Optionally, you can equip the 16-strand cable for exceptional mid-range accuracy. However, longer distance shots will require more skill, but are by no means impossible. As for the sight, it is up to personal preference. I use a VOK sight for multiplayer, but I usually go with a 4-powered scope in Warzone. I would also like to note at this time something for Warzone and Warzone only. The perk Fully Loaded is almost mandatory. Without it, equipping your crossbow from a loadout drop without having any sniper ammo already in your inventory will leave you with only one bolt and that bolt only. Also, another thing to note is you can drop all of your sniper ammo for a teammate before equipping this loadout, and you will get the 40 rounds back when equipping it. Remember, sharing is caring. Now in Ground War, you can simply go to ammunition crates, so sleight of hand will be more beneficial instead of fully loaded. I tested this class so you can get an idea what the accuracy and velocity with all these attachments combined looks like. Here I am using the gas bolts, since they have identical stats to the explosive bolts. And as we can see here, we have a tight grouping with minimum velocity loss. Using the same attachments, I switched to the thermite bolts and the results improved drastically. As you can see here, the bolts land consistently in one area, implying that if the thermite bolts are used in combination with anything else, this counters the broken accuracy I encountered previously. Now this build is closer to your complete stealth playstyle. I know some of you crossbow users out there like to be that silent death, killing without a sound. This setup rewards accuracy and patience more than any of the other classes. Here we have the range increasing arms and the stability increasing attachments, so your shots will go farther without sacrificing accuracy. I feel like this class is the best balance between velocity and accuracy, since using either the special bolts or the 28 strand cable will have too much of an impact on your accuracy. Just keep in mind, in Warzone, you will need to hit the head in order to guarantee a one hit down, and a follow up with another shot to finish them off while downed. In the right hands, the crossbow is one of the strongest weapons in Warzone. With full armor, the crossbow requires 2 hits to the chest to down or 1 to the head. However, with fury bolts, 1 hit will always down with the following explosion. The Fury Bolts, and to a lesser extent, the Thermite Bolts, are an excellent tool to flush out enemies hiding in small areas, such as attics. As you can see here, the explosion lowers his health a bit, and the following bolt to the chest downs him. The resulting explosion will kill him after he goes down. There is a second person hiding in there as well, and a few bolts fired in the attic will harass him. The beeping itself usually causes the players to panic and move as their first reaction, which is good to follow up on. Even with my terrible aim, I still win because of this. No matter the range, the Fury Bolt will always down. As you can see, he didn't have another teammate, so this is a kill instead of a down. In my experience, a headshot is always an instant down from the bolt itself, no matter the armor level. And if you're using explosive bolts, the following explosion will kill 99% of the time. There was only 2 times the explosion did not kill the target when downed, and I believe this is either a rare bug or perhaps EOD caused this. But I have yet to test this in a controlled environment to confirm or deny this. TheXclusiveAce did a video about EOD capping the explosive damage at 80, which has led me to believe that this is the case. Now for my most important tip. I cannot stress this enough. Unless you are extremely lucky or extremely skilled, the crossbow is not a frontline weapon. Direct assault and head-on firefights are not the way you should be using this. You will almost always be outgunned in these types of fights. You should be utilizing cover and using skirmishing tactics, such as taking a quick shot and moving cover to cover. These tactics are your greatest ally. The crossbow works best with the element of surprise more than any other gun I've used, and it's unique in the fact that it rewards a slower, stealthier playstyle. I think the crossbow makes for an excellent tool for the average player, but for the few players who become skilled with it, it is a devastating weapon. You can see here, I chose to disengage and find a spot that can flank him, and eventually he exposes himself by pushing and trying to flank my old position after I've already moved. And all it takes is a brief second of surprise and it's over. Shh, sleep now. The reason I emphasize this more defensive playstyle is because it's a common occurrence while playing aggressively to land your shot and still die, then seeing your target explode a mere second later. So a quick summary and my final thoughts on all of this. After all the testing I've done on each attachment, I recommend the 200-pound arms if you plan on hitting targets beyond 50 meters. And if you're skilled enough, use the 16-strand cable as well, and to avoid the 28-strand cable. In Warzone, the Fury Bolts make the crossbow a fearsome weapon, capable of downing in one hit. And without the explosive bolts, you should always try to aim for the head, unless you know your target only has 2 armor plates. Positioning and ambushing are the 2 main things you need to keep in mind while using the crossbow. You want to make the best of the few golden opportunities that arise during a match. And lastly, be patient. You don't always have to take the shot. There is nothing wrong with falling back and resetting the fight somewhere else in your favor. There's nothing wrong with changing your playstyle based on the weapon you're using. You wouldn't try taking long range shots with an Origin 12 and expect to live, so playing slow and methodical with the crossbow is no different. And that's it for my opinion. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe to see more. Since this is a hybrid channel, I upload art videos as well as gaming videos, so just keep that in mind. And if this video gets to 2 likes, I'll start working on the part 2 to this with the various scopes, zeroing distance, and range finding. I want to give special thanks to Elgoomtaf, I think that's how you say it, I'm sorry if I'm butchering that, and MutantMedia for their amazing crossbow guides. Those guides provided accurate data to compare to my findings and helped me greatly as a second opinion. If you're more focused on the core multiplayer, I recommend checking their channels out. Good luck, and happy hunting out there.